everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 694. Today we're going to talk about Crypt Hunters. This is a new two-player only game coming from Games Workshop set in the Warhammer Age of Sigmar universe. One side will be playing as the Stormcast Eternals, and then the other side will be playing as the Chain Rasps, or the Ghosts, basically. Now, if you're familiar with a game called Lost Patrol, which was set in the Warhammer 40k universe, which has had a couple editions over the years, this is very similar to that, but don't let that scare you away because that game had a lot of issues and problems, and a little spoiler, they've gone to some lengths to correct that with this edition. So you can see from the cover here, as the Stormcast Eternals, you're going to be a squad of castigators supplemented by a Gryph-hound. And I just wanted to make a real quick mention here about the box insert, which is actually a very nice box insert. You've got spots to slot in all your miniatures and all your tiles and cards and everything fits in very, very nicely. Now the miniatures themselves are push-to-fit miniatures. You can see you've got 10 Chain Rasps and 3 Stormcast plus their Gryph-hound. And I've gone ahead and assembled them here, and they're color-coded, which is nice. You don't really have to paint these if you don't want. But these are actually models that I already own from the Soul Wars box set and have painted some time ago. So here is what they might look like painted. Here are the Stormcast Eternal team, and then here is the Chain Rasp team. Now I did want to highlight this one particular miniature. You get like half of this miniature. This is not a miniature that you will even want to assemble or can assemble. You can just throw out this extra little bit. This is sort of what the front of it looks like there. So the sprues that they use for the miniatures here are just kind of reused from some of the other boxes that they've used. And usually the Chain Rasps come in a set of 20. So you have kind of this half a sprue that is linked to another sprue that doesn't exist in this box. If you see this one left over after going through the assembly instructions, it's okay. You can just toss it out. It's just kind of an extra little piece of Chad that's left over. So the objective of this game is for the Stormcast Eternals to navigate through a dungeon, through a crypt, and explore and find this piece called the Haitian Illuminator, basically this little blue tile here in the center. Now before you get to that, you have to go and find this winch tile, and this will reward you with the winch token, which will allow you to sort of access the controls on this Illuminator. So you've got to find the winch tile first, get that, and then navigate to the Illuminator. Now there's also this stairs tile. And in a normal game, you don't use that tile, but you can basically break the game up into a little bit of a longer game, more of an advanced game, and it basically plays as a two-part game. They call it a campaign game in the rules, but it's really just a little bit longer of a game, a little bit more advanced. But I'll talk a little bit about the differences between the, I don't want to call it basic or advanced, but it's a little bit murky is what it is, but it's a longer game. And I'll talk about that more at the review at the end. But in that case, you go get the winch tile first and then go to the stairs, and then you'll kind of reset and shuffle and go to the next level and then put in the final objective tile in that and then try to get to that then. Now after setup, the game might look a little something like this, with the 4 Stormcast Eternal figures in the center and then some other hallways and things drawn out from where they can see. So the first step of each turn, which is actually skipped at the very beginning of the game because it's part of setup, is for the Ghost player, the Chain Rasp player, to deal out tiles in such a way that the Stormcast can see down them. So you're going to draw tiles and deal them out and try to situate little traps and corners and things to be the worst possible situation for the Stormcast player. But once you get to kind of like a corner that a Stormcast can't see down, you'll stop adding tiles to that particular wedge of the dungeon or of the crypt. Now once you do this for setup, you're also going to deal cards to each of the players. You've got a deck of Chain Rasp cards and Stormcast cards, and each side's going to get 3 cards, and these are special abilities, and you can play one of these on a turn, but these are all the cards that you get for the game, and sometimes they'll cast special effects on particular targets or particular tiles on the board, or beef up an attack or something like that. And you've also got little cards indicating the various figures. The Chain Rasp player just has basically all Chain Rasps and then this special Dread Warden figure, which I'll explain in a little bit. And then the Stormcasts have 4 a little bit more distinct character cards. We can take a look at this example here of Aura Suresight. He's got an attack ability of 2, a move of 1, and 2 wounds, where some of the other Stormcasts might move a little faster, have more wounds, more attacks. Oris has a special ability that allows the Stormcast to basically eke out an extra action every turn, as long as he still exists. So after that add tiles step, in which we've just done in setup, we're going to go through a couple other phases. The Stormcast Eternals will activate, then we'll remove tiles from the board, then the Chain Rasps will get reinforcements, and then they'll activate. Now the actions that you get during your activation phase are very simple. Both sides get the same actions. You can move and or attack. Now each Stormcast figure can get 2 actions. They can do 2 moves, 2 attacks, or 1 of each. The Chain Rasp player gets 3 actions total across the whole team, or 4 across the whole team if the Dread Warden is available. And that's again move or attack, and you'll spread that out. And so we'll take a look at more detail here. So when a Stormcast moves, they move up to their movement allowance. The Gryph-hound is special in that he can move 2 spaces. All the other Stormcasts can only move 1 space. Now, except for the very, very beginning of the game where you have all 4 Stormcasts in the center, you can only ever have 2 Stormcasts in the same tile. Now, after the Stormcast activation, when they've moved and attacked, then we're going to take a look and see where the Stormcasts have sort of left the dungeon behind, and then anything that they don't have line of sight to, or they can't move 1 space and then have line of sight to, is going to then disappear. And any chain rafts that might be on those tiles are also going to disappear. And this is really probably the most strategic thing that a Stormcast can do in a lot of ways, because you can sort of delete a lot of ghosts all at once if you move correctly. So let's look at this situation. We've got the 2 Stormcasts here with some ghosts chasing them down the hallway there. Now, they can see straight down the corridor, and if they moved 1 space here to this green tile, then they could look to the left and right a little bit. But they would not be able to see the hallways further down the line, which currently have ghosts on them. So in this step, you basically take a look and see what they have line of sight to and what they could have line of sight to if they moved 1 space in a direction, and then take off all the other tiles and remove those from the game. Now you can see we left here that purple tile just on the left there, because if we did move up to this green spot, then we would have line of sight down that hallway. After that quick step, we're going to take a look at any of the sort of exits or entrances that are left hanging open like we see here. In this case, we have 3, 1 on the tile on the left and 2 on the tile on the right. And for each open entrance, we're going to place a new chain rasp, and they're going to appear on the board. And then we'll move into the chain rasp activation phase. Now when a chain rasp figure moves, it can do it in 2 ways. One, it could just move 1 space through 1 wall, and the chain rasp can also fight through walls. However, if they move through a hallway, they can move down the full extent of the hallway until they run into a Stormcast or a wall in a straight line, and they can pick up other ghosts along the way. So in this case, we can see the Dread Warden moving along towards the Stormcast on the left, and they're going to go ahead and pick up those 2 chain rasps along the way, and we'll end up with 3 ghosts all on the same tile there. And again, you can only have 3 ghosts at a time on a tile. Now it's worth noting there that the Dread Warden will only be allowed on the board once there are 4 other ghosts already on the board. And so that extra action can be quite huge actually from the ghost player. So the Stormcast player might want to try to position themselves in such a way to attack the tile that the Dread Warden is on to try to get rid of them. And then the ghost player will know that, and they'll try to position it in such a way that they're still involved in the action, but not so far away that when it comes time to remove the tiles, the Dread Warden disappears. So there's some management of those exits and entrances as well. And I should also mention that if a Stormcast player is standing on a tile with entrances, then no chain rasps will appear. Now there's also little green crystally tiles that chain rasps can kind of appear in the middle of the dungeon, and each of those just spawns 1 chain rasp. And there's some other little special tiles that are like traps that will possibly do damage to Stormcast or slow down their movement and stuff like that. Now when either side attacks, they're going to roll these attack dice that you see here. The chain rasps, when they attack, are going to roll 1 dice per figure that's on that tile. So you'll basically activate a tile and then roll that many dice. And the chain rasps are looking for the skulls, which you see 2 of here. Now the Stormcast figures have an attack value, which is shown on their card. And when they roll dice, they're going to roll dice equal to that value, and they're looking for the lightning bolts. So when a chain rasp gets damaged, then you have to basically just delete 1 of those that are on that tile. When the Stormcast takes damage, they have multiple wounds except for the Gryph-hound, and so you're going to track wounds on their card, placing little markers to keep track of how many wounds they have. So that is the gist of the game. You keep playing until all the Stormcasts are dead, or they achieve their objective. And I didn't mention this, probably worth noting, is that when a chain rasp figure is killed, it just kind of goes back into the pool and then it can come out. So those are kind of infinitely respawning characters. But when a Stormcast is dead, it's dead. And it's worth re-mentioning that you do have a hand of 3 cards, and you can play one of those on a turn. And those are very special activations that are basically once per game activations that will maybe get you out of a jam or kind of double down and put pressure on the opposing player. So let's go through my 3 pillars of review. Play count, obviously, it's only a 2-player game. The play time is a little bit different depending if you're playing the sort of basic game or the advanced game. And I don't know which game I like better in terms of those, but in terms of the time to play, it says 30 minutes on the box, and I'd say the straightforward basic game, definitely a 30-minute game. If you play the advanced game, I think it's possible to go to about 45 minutes, but probably not that much longer, because it basically splits the game into 2 halves, but each of those halves is not like playing a full game. It's going to be a little bit shorter based on how you kind of shuffle the tiles and where you feed the special tiles into the stacks. So it's not going to go really that much longer than 30 minutes. So what is this game like? Well, it's obviously like Lost Patrol, but really this is, at the end of the day, this is very much like a fixed Lost Patrol. You've got the extra cards, you've got the different cool movement abilities. You've got, I think, a little bit more of a fair fight for the Stormcast player. The Lost Patrol game had a problem. It was basically Space Marine Scouts versus Gene Stealers, I think. I don't remember exactly. And so it was virtually impossible for the Space Marine player to win that game. Now, I played this 4 times, one of which was that kind of 2-part advanced / campaign game. And the Ghost player won 3 times. The one game that the Stormcast player did win was the 2-part advanced game, although one of the other basic games, it came down to literally a die roll. If the die roll would have went one other way, then the Stormcast won versus the Chain Rasp, who actually did win that. But I think that's okay. So a lot of people, depending on your sort of proclivities or whatever, you might not like that you played the game, but it was a really exciting game. I mean, it was like, chomping nails right to the end, and it was like, oh no, it's down to there, and it's definitely harder for the Stormcast player to win. It's not like perfectly balanced, but I do not think this game would be as fun as it is, and it's super fun if it was perfectly balanced. That sort of lopsidedness is cool. It's one of the things that gives the game kind of its charm, and it is possible, obviously, for the Stormcast player to win this game. It's just a little bit harder. Now, the way that the game sort of breaks down is the most important part of the game is really the tile placement. Because moving and attacking, those decisions are usually pretty straightforward as far as what each player has to talk about there in terms of what they're trying to figure out. But the tile placement from the Ghost player and trying to basically get the Stormcast player to move as slow as possible so you can whittle away at them, get them down. And once you start to kind of lose figures as the Stormcast player, then it becomes that much more difficult because you don't have that much sort of firepower going back at the Ghost to sort of fend them off. And so if you can get them, slow them down, whittle them away, and then start to chip away, and then, it'll kind of, the tidal wave will sort of swing against them. And I think that's a little bit, probably the main reason why it's harder for the Stormcast player to win, because once they start to lose figures, they're done. And whereas the Ghost player can just keep coming back. So you're going to be playing tiles, and that you don't want to kind of overlook that. And I don't really want to talk too much about the strategy there. Just kind of tell you, if you're coming new to this and you want some strategy tip, make the Stormcast player move as slow through the dungeon as they can. But there's some cool kind of interesting things you could do with corners and some of this different special tiles. And there is, I think, probably a better way to play that. Versus another way. So that, I'll just say that much. Then as far as a Stormcast player, really again the tiles is really the most important part. Like I kind of mentioned in the walkthrough, if you can move yourself in such a way that when it comes time to do that tile check and see how many tiles you're going to delete, there's a couple things that can happen. You can get in a situation where you delete a lot of ghosts and they go away, so they're going to not be right on your back right away. And then you might be in a position where you kind of delete a lot of the entrances because the ghosts are always going to spawn at those entrances. So you might have like a decent amount of ghosts dealing with now, but it might be better to move in such a way that you don't have like four or five more coming right on top of that. So the whole tile placement movement aspect is really the biggest part of the game. There's not like combos and special abilities and all those, kind of combat-y kind of things that are really the focus of how you're supposed to win the game, which makes this a really interesting, sort of hard to sort of pin down game, because it has that kind of just basic tile placement, Carcassonne sort of vibe, you know what I mean? So it has that real interesting spatial thing going on. But then on the flip side of that, there's this dice-driven combat with these other little special powers that you can sort of activate to kind of get yourself out of a jam. So that melding of those two kind of styles of gameplay is really interesting and fun. And I don't want to come here and try to like oversell the amount of strategy that's in the game. I think they have like some kind of difficulty rating scale of like 1 to 5, and it's a 2 on the box. So it's not something where you're going to sit there and crunch, but it's a 30-minute filler game that has just the right amount of kind of fun, dumb luck with the dice and the combat and the card play and all that kind of stuff, with the kind of interesting like, oh, okay, well, I'll put this tile here, and then I'll put this one there, and I'll maybe try to like, put a lot of these danger tiles in this way because as the Stormcast player, you want to kind of burn through that tile deck as quickly as you can before your dudes are dead. And so you can find the winch tile and then find the stairs or the illuminator thingy. And so, yeah, it's a really fun, simple game that is just really refreshing to play. Now, as far as, I'll leave you with this part of it. Because this is a real hard one to sell, because it's like, well, it's got some cool spatial Eurofied tile placement with some dice chucking combat. Like how many people are going to like both of that? But as far as the comparison between the sort of the basic game and the longer campaign advanced game, I don't know. I kind of like the straightforward simplicity of the basic game, but I think that might be a little bit harder on the Stormcast than some people might want. Whereas with the longer game, so instead of having to go through the entire stack, which is what you have to do with the base game, because the objective tiles is right at the bottom every time. In the other game, you shuffle the stairs in the first game and then the objective tile in the second game, somewhere in the 9 to 10 tiles at the bottom of the stack. So you don't have to get all the way through. And so even though you have to play it twice effectively, there's something about those last 10 tiles where things can just go wrong. So you can get down to the bottom of that, and then if you're kind of lucky, that objective tile will be somewhere near the top of that stack. So that can be a little bit easier on you as a Stormcast player. The other thing the Stormcast player has is they have 5 cards to use across both games, whereas the Ghost player still only has the 3. Each side gets 3 cards in the basic game, but the Stormcast gets 5 in the long game, and you still only have 3 as a Ghost player. And so you have a little bit more tools, so you can be a little bit more loosey-goosey with your card play. Because again, once you play it, it's gone, and that's it. Now you're down a card, and that's all you've got for the whole game. I should say each side gets 10 cards, so when you shuffle up and deal at the beginning of the game, there's some variety there. So that's a little bit another bonus for the Stormcast player, because they get a little bit more to choose from, a little bit more ammunition in their tool belt, so to speak. So I think I kind of like that a little bit better, but I don't know. I mean, I've seen where the Stormcast almost won the basic game and came down to a die roll, which is theoretically harder on the Stormcast. So I don't know. I think you can kind of just play with it, whatever you kind of feel like. But I do kind of lean towards that advanced game because it's a little bit more of a narrative thing. You get to the stairs. Any Stormcats that are still alive will heal their wounds, kind of lick their wounds, and you can start up again. And then it feels like a little bit more of an exploration as well. But anyway, I definitely recommend this game. I know it's probably going to hit and miss with a lot of people. But if you have a chance to give it a try, try it out, check it out. But it's really kind of sublimely fun, and every time I play it, I'm like, this shouldn't be as fun as this actually is. But it's really super fun, and I definitely recommend it. Okay, thanks.